Imagine walking along a beautiful, sun-drenched beach in Australia, the sand between your toes and the sound of waves crashing nearby. Suddenly, rising out of the shoreline like a giant, rusted skeleton, you see it, a massive, decaying ship. It looks like something out of a movie, a ghost from another century just sitting there, refusing to be swallowed by the ocean. This is the SS Maheno, and its journey from being the pride of the seas to a rusting landmark on Fraser Island is one of the most incredible stories you will ever hear. It's not just a wreck, it's a veteran, a lifesaver, and a mystery all rolled into one. Back in 1905, the SS Maheno was a real beauty. It was launched in Scotland, built by the famous Denny and Brothers Yard near Glasgow. For the people of New Zealand and Australia, she was the ultimate way to travel. She wasn't huge, about 5,000 tons, but she was incredibly fast. In fact, she held the speed record between Sydney and Wellington for over 20 years. Imagine a sleek ship with two tall funnels cutting through the rough waters of the Tasman Sea at nearly 20 knots. For 10 years, she was a floating palace, connecting families and businessmen across the ocean. But then, 1914 changed everything. When World War I broke out, the world didn't need luxury liners. It needed help. By 1915, thousands of soldiers from Australia and New Zealand were being wounded at Gallipoli. There was a desperate need for hospital ships, and the Maheno was called to duty. She was stripped of her fancy furniture and painted bright white with huge red crosses on her sides. Inside, the grand dining rooms became operating theaters and wards for hundreds of injured men. The Maheno became a true hero. She dodged mines and submarines to carry over 25,000 sick and wounded soldiers back home. By the time the war ended in 1918, she was tired and worn out. She went back to being a passenger ship for a while, but as the years went by, newer and more modern ships started taking over. By 1935, the 30-year-old steamer was officially retired and sold for scrap to a company in Japan. Now, this is where the story takes a dark and dramatic turn. The ship was meant to be towed from Sydney all the way to Osaka, Japan. To save money, the Japanese buyers decided to have a smaller ship called the Unato, the Maheno. They even took off the Maheno's propellers to make it easier to pull. On July 3rd, 1935, they set off on what was supposed to be a month-long journey. 4 days into the trip, they ran right into a massive tropical cyclone off the coast of Queensland. The sea was violent and the wind was howling. The Una was struggling to pull the 5,000-ton Maheno, which was acting like a giant anchor in the storm. Suddenly, the massive towing cable, which was about 5 inches thick, snapped like a piece of string. The Maheno was gone, drifting helplessly into the dark, stormy night with only 8 crew members on board. For days, no one knew if they were alive or dead. But then, an airplane spotted something amazing. The Maheno hadn't sunk. It had drifted perfectly upright onto the beach of Fraser Island. The crew had survived and were camping on the sand, waiting for rescue. When rescuers finally reached them, they found a strange sight. The men had set up tents and were even flying a Japanese flag. Since the ship was stuck so deep in the sand, it couldn't be saved. The owners didn't even have insurance for the tow, so they just left her there. Over the next few months, the ship became a local sensation. Get this. There was actually a wedding held on the deck of the wrecked ship. The customs officer in charge of the wreck had delayed his wedding so many times that his fiancée insisted they just get married right there on the stranded liner. Eventually, the ship was stripped of everything valuable: the bells, the organ, the fine woodwork. During World War II, the Royal Australian Air Force even used the rusting hull for target practice. Today, nearly 90 years later, the SS Maheno is still there. She is a shell of her former self, a rusted metal skeleton being slowly eaten by the sea. But she remains the most famous ghost of Fraser Island. She survived the Great War and a terrifying cyclone, only to find her final resting place on a beach where thousands of people visit her every year. If you enjoyed diving into this piece of history with me, please hit that like button and subscribe to help me bring more of these forgotten stories to light. I'm the Sleeping Historian, and I'll see you in the next one.